All right, I've got another top 5 lecture coming at you right now. In fact, this one actually may be even more important. In fact, this might be my number 1 or 2 most important lecture of the entire course, because what we're going to talk about is a core concept that's going to follow us through the rest of the course. So it's really critical to get that understanding right now. It's going to make the rest of the course much, much easier. So what we're talking about here is filter direction. And to show you what that's all about, look at this simple data model here. We've got 2 data tables, transactions and returns, and both are connected to the calendar lookup based on a date field. Now, note the filter directions, which are shown as arrows in each of these relationships. In Power Pivot 2016, these are always going to point from the one side of the relationship, typically the lookup, to the many side, typically the data table. And I've got a caveat again, for some strange, crazy reason, in some older versions of Power Pivot, you might see those arrows reversed. To be honest, I don't know if that was intentional or a bug or what, but the 2016 version is really what it should look like, because this allows us to very easily visualize the directions that filters flow. And now, what do I mean by filters flowing? Well, if you filter a table, it will impact obviously that table itself, but also any tables downstream of it as defined by that filter relationship and the direction of the arrow. So I want that to sink in for a second. When you filter a table, like the calendar lookup, you're not just filtering the calendar, you're filtering the calendar plus any related tables that are downstream. So when you follow the arrows, any of those connected tables will filter as well. So what that means is that if we're analyzing both transactions and returns in the same pivot table, filtering by the calendar lookup date will correctly filter both data tables, since both are related and both are downstream. But if instead we tried to filter by the date field in the transactions table, we're going to get incorrect unfiltered returns values, because there's no way for that date filter in the transactions table to flow back upstream to calendar lookup where it can connect to returns. And there's no other path between transactions and returns. So this down arrow is like a one-way street sign. Filters can go down this street, but not back up. So to follow with that thought, one pro tip that I'm a big fan of here: arrange your lookup tables above your data tables in diagram view. And that's a really nice way to remind yourself that filters always flow downstream. Now, this topic is so important that it's worth another quick demonstration here. So, little teaser, we're going to look at what a Power Pivot field list looks like. You'll see it looks just like a regular pivot table field list, except we have access to multiple tables now in our model. And if we were to grab that date field from the calendar lookup and pull it down into the row labels, we could see something like this. We're analyzing transactions and returns as our values, broken down by that date field from the calendar lookup. So when we do this, those returns values look good. They're properly filtered, they're properly segmented by date, because it's properly related to the calendar lookup table. Now, on the flip side, if we take the transaction date from the transactions table and pull that one into our row labels, first of all, you're going to see this little yellow warning flag, which you'll grow to love because it's a beautiful thing. But you will also see data like this, just totally silly data in the returns column. And that's because the returns column has no way of knowing that you're trying to filter on date, because that date came from the transactions table. And remember, there's no other relationship between the two. So returns are totally blind to what's going on or what's being filtered in the transaction table itself. So as a result, you'll see correct values for transactions because it's filtering within its own table, but you'll get these unfiltered totals for the returns column in every single row. So you can see why this is such an important concept to understand, and you can start to see why, with more complex data models and more complex relationships, it might be easy for mistakes like this to happen without them being quite as obvious as the example we're showing here. So remember that filter direction is critical and it will continue to be critical as we continue with the course.